So I want to talk to you a little bit about the voice inside your head, the little voice inside your head. There are millions of causes out there to be concerned about, right? There's homelessness, there's unemployment, there's kids dropping out of school, there's suicide, bullying, poverty, there's people not being able to find jobs once they get out of jail, there's the achievement gap, there's laws in this country that hurt people, there's global warming, health, war, campaign finance reform, how people treat animals, children, old people, anyone who's different from us. The list is endless. These are just a few issues that I care about. How many of you feel like you have too many causes to fill up a lifetime and it's hard to decide what to focus on? Yeah, most of you. How many of you don't yet feel drawn to a particular issue, so you're not exactly sure what you were put on this earth to do yet? A few of us. And how many know exactly what you were put on this earth to do? All right, that's the smallest group among us, which sounds about right. So for me, that issue is homelessness and children and families. In our nation's capital, homelessness among families has grown 70% since the recession about 5 years ago. Families are considered the hidden homeless because you don't see them sleeping on park benches with their children generally. But now families and children make up the typical homeless person in DC. They're now the majority of what it means to be homeless. But of course, statistics don't really speak to me as well as the child I know who lives at DC General Emergency Family Shelter, the largest shelter in our city where 500 children and families live today. And this little baby is 9 months old and he can't crawl because the floors of the shelter are too dirty. And babies and toddlers don't have this room to explore like babies are supposed to do. Or the 5-year-old child who got evicted and he came home from school and he lost everything and he was only able to salvage a little matchbox car and the gutter, which he took to school and then promptly got it taken away from him for playing in class. Or the teenager who ends up at DC General with hardly any, barely the clothes on her back, has no appropriate place to study or do her homework at night, and she desperately wants to keep the secret from her friends at school that she's living in a shelter. So I grew up in Wisconsin, the northernmost county in Wisconsin, where there's not even a stoplight. I didn't know much about urban family homelessness, obviously. At that time, I only knew I cared about children. And on my long school bus, every morning, it was about an hour long, because it was dozens of little small towns that we picked kids up from. There were a couple kids that we picked up from a trailer house, and as they tumbled onto the bus, it seemed like they had a cloud full of stale cigarette smoke from their house following them. Their jackets were ripped and torn. And I would watch them be teased and beat up and pushed around and shoved every morning, and it was just haunting for me. And I was a pretty passive kid. I was pretty quiet. But one day I just couldn't take it anymore. So I started bringing children's books from home. And as soon as they got on the bus, I kind of ambushed them and sat next to them and started reading to them to distract them and protect them from the bigger kids. And that's how I started to sort of learn my own quiet power, my own quiet leadership in terms of how to make a difference in this world. And we all see things that other people don't see. And it's our job to act and to listen to that little voice, because that voice is in us for a reason. And sometimes we're too busy to listen, or there are a variety of reasons that we don't listen to that voice. And for me, I was too scared to listen. Because as I mentioned, I wasn't a loud leader. I wasn't even a leader at all in high school. So who are the quiet leaders out there among us? Excellent. So for those quiet leaders out there, it's your job to really listen to that voice and push yourself to speak up more than normal. And how about my loud leaders? Who are the loud leaders out there? Excellent. And you are definitely blessed. And at the same time, sometimes you also need to listen extra hard to that quiet voice and know when to step aside and push others to the spotlight, to give others a chance to be heard. So for me, the leader that really compelled me to leave my small Wisconsin hometown was Marian Wright Edelman from the Children's Defense Fund. Have any of you heard of her or CDF? So it's the nation's largest and most powerful child advocacy organization that lobbies for fair budget investments in children's programs, mostly focused on poor and minority children. And so I came here on a Greyhound bus because I was too afraid to fly, didn't know anyone, started interning right out of college. And it was an incredible experience. But I quickly felt very disconnected from the communities of children that I was advocating for, because there are no children at the Children's Defense Fund. So I started volunteering at the nation's largest homeless shelter in DC called CCNV, located by Union Station. Anyone ever heard of it or seen it? It's a huge warehouse. It takes up almost a city block, 1,500 beds. And in the mid-90s, there were children living there. So on my lunch break, I walked over to the shelters, only a block away from where I worked, and took a tour, and I was shocked to see what I saw. Rows and rows of metal bunk beds, sheets for doors, half-dressed children languishing in the hallways, and not a single toy in sight. And I asked the woman giving me a tour, I said, "Doesn't anyone ever donate any toys?" And she said, "Yeah, from time to time, but we keep them locked in a closet so the kids don't make a mess." So here I was trying to initiate an employee toy drive, and it quickly became clear that was not going to be enough, that we couldn't donate our toys and make a difference. We literally needed to donate ourselves to make sure those toys could actually be used. And that's kind of when I found my niche. I discovered that this was something that nobody else was doing. And it wasn't just this shelter, but it was shelters across the city and across this country that housed children. But because of the changing demographics of homelessness, they were still set up like they were housing single men. They weren't responding to the special needs of children and families in shelters. My friends and I set up a playroom, and we filled it with toys, books, and activities, and then we started staffing that playroom and providing one-on-one attention to children. And we were having a ball at the end of our long days in the office, having an excuse to sit down and take out a can of Play-Doh and throw around a football and create fabulous theater productions together. The children were like Helen Keller, touching every toy in sight, just so desperate to play. And the parents were so relieved to finally have a chance to go down to the store and get some food, to take a shower, to cook, to do laundry, to just have a few moments of peace at the end of a long day in their struggle amidst homelessness. So it seemed like a win-win. And after years of doing this, I wasn't able to find my dream job, so I created it. Now I can run the Homeless Children's Playtime Project full-time. We serve 868 children a year. We have 150 volunteers who dedicate their weeks to running these programs. But I was fortunate because it's a luxury to start something. And in some ways, it's almost easier to start something new rather than change systems from within. And both is very noble work. My mom originally told me when I was at Children's Defense Fund trying to decide what to do, she said, "You know what, if you were emptying garbage cans at the Children's Defense Fund, you would be lucky." In other words, service means doing whatever needs to be done. If you're serving to be in the spotlight, is that really service? So there are many ways to be a quiet leader and a loud leader, and to know how you can uniquely contribute by listening to that voice. There are also pressures. We can't, sometimes, as I mentioned, it's a luxury to follow your dream and to listen to that voice, because sometimes family pressures dictate that money sometimes needs to be a priority, to be the first person in your family to not have to worry about money. And so then maybe you'll make a lot of money and give all of it away someday. But that's when you really have to listen, because money talks. So each one of you has the power to do what nobody else is doing or nobody else is thinking about, or adding to the conversation in a way that nobody has before, and really make an impact that absolutely would not happen without you.